I claim to be a movie person and I haven't made any videos about movies in like a year right now. So let's fix that. Today we are doing double reviews. Rest assured, both are spoiler free of The Haunted Mansion and Oppenheimer, two films that I saw recently. Let's dive right in with The Haunted Mansion. Critical reception to this movie seems to be that most people didn't really like it. That's okay, but for me, this movie was amazing. Like, it perfectly encapsulated that period of my life where I was obsessed with the Haunted Mansion and any theme park ride lore. This was probably like in my tweens, preteens, and it made me just want to jump right back into it. I know this sounds really cheesy, but like, this movie made me believe in magic again. This was the movie that young little Orwell was waiting for her whole life, you know? We had that really crappy one in the 2000s, and then, you know, you have all these, like, supplementary materials. They have Haunted Mansion comics and books, and all this sort of hidden lore that extends beyond the ride, and to see everything that I had just spent time randomly just deciding, you know what, I'm gonna devote my life to this theme park extended universe. To see all that be brought to life in front of me was a magical experience. I know people really hate this, but I personally love when movies are just chock full of references to a source material or other things. I think it's so much fun. And as for references, consider this the Super Mario movie of horror movies. Like, every bit of it, from start to finish, is just jam packed with references to not only the Haunted Mansion mythology, but all of Disney as a whole. And it was so much fun. As for the story, I was a little bit skeptical at first, but then when they dive right in with all the spooky stuff, I was 100% on board that train. This movie is basically just a darker version of Ghostbusters, and as a Ghostbusters fan, I loved it. And speaking of Ghostbusters, another thing that I love about this movie is its joke to scare ratio is pretty 50-50. And for those of you who don't like jump scares, don't worry, it's not that bad. Honestly, like, I wouldn't say any of the jump scares are worse than anything from Five Nights at Freddy's. But it still is really freaking cool to see Disney attempt horror. As for the characters, oh my god, they put everybody in this movie. This is the Super Smash Brothers, the everyone is here. There is one character who is very much a fan favorite who got a very expanded role in this movie, and I'm not sure what the Haunted Mansion fandom as a whole is going to think of this new portrayal, but I am just going to say this right now. This is the best portrayal of this character in any Haunted Mansion media, including the ride itself. Again, I'm being vague on who this is because I want it to be spoiler free, but don't worry, I will do a full spoiler review soon so you know exactly who I'm talking about. A few of the main ghost characters are really deep cuts from the Haunted Mansion lore, and I thought that was awesome. Like, I'm not trying to gatekeep or anything, I absolutely hate gatekeeping, but a few of the main ghost characters, unless you were one of the weirdos like me that spent time consuming every Disney fan page and Haunted Mansion media out there, you probably won't recognize a couple of these characters because they aren't from the ride, they are from some sort of book or cast member stories. One of the characters is such a deep cut that they were actually a character from a scrapped concept of the original Haunted Mansion. How cool is that? As for the new human characters, I thought that they were really fun, and some of them I found quite relatable, and I loved their quirky aesthetics and humor. I would love to see them come back in some form, whether it's in the parks themselves as like part of a meet and greet, Halloween event, or parade, whatever, or in more books and comics in the future. If I had one tiny little nitpick about this movie, it's that my favorite character in the franchise was extremely underutilized. But that being said, I am extremely happy that they appeared in this movie at all and they got the amount of screen time that they did. I just think that, they did quite a few good scares with this character, but I really think they could have had a bigger role considering how important they are to the lore and how much they appear on merchandise. And I'm a huge hater on CGI ghosts, right? I love ghost movies, but I really like the way they used to be done back in the 80s with movies like Poltergeist, Ghostbusters, and Raiders of the Lost Ark. I thought the ghosts in this movie looked awesome. They were really stylized in that they didn't look like they were from any other movie or franchise. You see them and you instantly know that it's the Haunted Mansion. And they have the classic look that all the characters have, but in this sort of grittier, darker sort of art style. And I really liked the new appearances of these characters. So, to summarize, The Haunted Mansion was a blast. It's like the feel-good summer blockbuster of the horror industry, while also, for me personally, I don't know, how many people going to see this will have had the same experience, but for me personally, as someone who got super deep into the Haunted Mansion fandom, it was a really sweet nostalgia trip for me. I loved every second. If I were to assign some sort of stars or rating, it would definitely be a 10 out of 10 for me. And now for Oppenheimer. This movie left me absolutely speechless for quite a few minutes after leaving the theater. Honestly, I saw it about a week ago. I was kind of too scared to make a video on Oppenheimer because it was so brilliant that I can barely even put it into words. I feel like it's not my place to talk about this movie. There are so many amazing analysis videos and podcasts that really dissect this movie, and I was absolutely captivated by this. I think that give it 10, 20 years, when we look back on the 2020s as just another decade of movies, like we see the 1980s and 90s, and we make best of lists, we ask people what they remembered, what their favorite movie is. Oppenheimer is definitely going to be a very popular answer. This movie is going to be the cinematic and cultural event of my generation. It's going to be our equivalent to Titanic, Gone with the Wind, Citizen Kane, all those prestigious films that still have lasting impacts today. I've seen quite a few biopics in my lifetime. I like them. I think they can be really great movies if done right. Oppenheimer absolutely breaks every trope that I've come to expect from biopics. This movie is literally like reinventing the wheel of this genre. I was not expecting anything close to what I saw. I went into it sort of knowing who Oppenheimer was, but just expecting another science biopic. This is like no movie I have ever seen before, whether in the biopic genre or not. And you know what the craziest thing about this movie is? I knew what was going to happen. We all knew what was going to happen. As soon as you hear what the movie's about, you kind of come to that conclusion. But I was still really surprised by so much of the movie. I think Oppenheimer is going to spawn a subgenre or style or trend of similar movies once other directors and studios saw how well it did in the box office and critically, and they're going to try and imitate the style. Whether that's for better or for worse, I don't know. Time will tell. I'm trying to talk vague about what I mean by the style because I really do think it's a movie that you should go into not knowing much about it. Now, come awards season, I'll admit that this is very hypocritical of me. I totally understand that. I'm 100% self aware of this, but whenever there is an Oscar sweep, or any award show for that matter, I'm kind of like, ooh, they're biased just because it's a drama starring this actor about this subject, they're gonna give it all the awards. But part of me is kind of hoping for an Oppenheimer sweep this year. And to be honest, I think it's because of the catharsis of a movie I actually really enjoyed getting awards, because none of my favorite movies from any year, I don't think, have like done big in awards. Last year I was really rooting for The Fablemans sweep, but I don't think it got even one. Which I'm surprised, because it's the movie about making movies, and I thought that would be really cool if the movie about making movies won an award for movie of the year. But I don't know. I thought the Academy of Turn Up Your Nose would be all over that, but I guess not. So obviously Oppenheimer is going to be nominated for a crap ton of awards, right? Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actors, so and so. What I honestly don't know what it's up against for those categories, so I don't really know how it's going to do in those. But I am saying this now, this is going to take all the sound categories, no matter how many they have this year. Soundtrack, sound effects, sound mixing. I definitely think it is very deserving, and best editing as well. Overall, Oppenheimer is a deep, provocative, eye opening movie experience. While some of the long conversation scenes did kind of lose me, I honestly think, I can totally forgive that based on the rest of the movie. I would definitely say, if I had to quantify this, a 10 out of 10. This is going to bring forth a new wave of film.